This is the Albuquerque Business Podcast with your host, Jason Rigby. Each week, we interview leading local business leaders to inspire the vision and spirit that is in every entrepreneur, discussing strengths, weakness, strategies, systems, and the problems we can all solve together to fulfill a shared vision of a new future for Albuquerque.
Hi, and welcome to the Albuquerque Business Podcast. This is Jason Rigby, your host. And today on the show, we have Lance Maurer. Did I pronounce that right?
You did.
With Cinnafilm. I want to kind of just hop right in if we can, Lance, because I know everybody's intrigued with what's going on here in Albuquerque. Mm-hmm. We keep hearing all these stories about these different film companies coming in. And at the end of the day, when we look at what's happening in Albuquerque, I know we had talked earlier off the air that there's kind of something that we're missing on the film industry here. And I know you're more technical on the back end side of things, and we'll get into your company, but I kind of want to hit it right off the bat. What is, in your opinion, what does Albuquerque need to do, and what are they doing right to get the film industry here?
Wow, okay. Big question. I appreciate that. It's going to be fun to answer. And thanks for having me, first of all. It's a pleasure to be here. So just to give you a quick background on what qualifies me to try to answer this question, I work in media and entertainment. Company Cinnafilm provides technology to the professional enterprise sector. Our clients include all of the big names like HBO and NBC and CBS, BBC. We've been working in this sector for about 10 years, solving some really tough workflow problems, and so we get to see a lot of the variations of problems that come through the pipelines. We've been involved with everything from the restoration of Gone with the Wind to the delivery of the World Cup. So we've kind of seen it all. And having that vantage point gives me sort of a unique insight into being able to answer that question, which is, what do I think Albuquerque's doing right and what might be improved upon? So being constructive in nature, I'll focus on the improvements. As far as what Albuquerque's doing right, I mean, I'm born and raised here, so I think Albuquerque has always been kind of a cool, quirky place to be.
Right.
I think it's got a nice identity that differentiates itself. Breaking Bad's a great example of how charismatic the city actually is. I think it was, even if we have some problems, I mean, all cities have some kind of problems. So I think the city keeping its identity through all of this,
right,
that's a big thing that it's doing right. And, you know, I've seen the film industry grow here statewide with a lot of focus, obviously, on Albuquerque. And Ann Lerner did a fantastic job over the years in building up a lot of very positive rapport. And Grubb over there at CNM has built an incredible program. And I know I'm leaving off other people. So a lot of what Albuquerque is doing right is the result of individuals who have stood up and really put a lot of time and energy and oomph into making New Mexico a great place to shoot content. So that's what it's doing right. And, you know, there's always room for improvement. These bills and these laws that are being used by the studios to shoot content and make it affordable, it draws them out here. And being able to defend that year over year and actually make sure that it's good for the economy, that's another thing that New Mexico and Albuquerque both do right. So there's been a lot of self-analysis on that, and I think they do a good job at that. My expertise is more on the backside of things and what classically has been known as post-production. So in the old days, it was film and television, and the old days is actually only about 10 years ago. So, you know, things have changed.
It goes quick, huh?
It really does. And when I started the company, I was focused on film, and then I went into television, and having done both, I'm now in streaming or video on demand, also known as over the top. So, which is the right place to be because, as everyone can see, you know, the studios are starting to conglomerate and do massive acquisitions and make content that gets to the living room and to the theater. So I think what Albuquerque needs to do, and New Mexico is part of that, so I'm not going to just say it's Albuquerque, it really is statewide. In order for us to compete long-term for that business, we need to start recognizing and preparing for how those workflows actually work. There's no other better way to say that. We need to understand better what the media supply chain looks like, which is when a studio wants to make a piece of content, they need to be able to, you know, budget it and shoot it, and then all of those raw materials need to go into a factory and get assembled for delivery. And I think that what we need to start focusing is the factory side of the equation, which is literally, it's important because for twofold. One is that there's a lot of high-tech jobs that work in that sector. The other thing is you no longer have to be in Los Angeles to work in that field. With the advent of the internet and the speed of things to come, including 5G, you know, the cloud is now becoming a real place that people can work. And what that means is it doesn't matter where you call home. And so I think that Albuquerque and New Mexico both need to start thinking forward a little bit on how to build out some infrastructure that will appeal to the folks making the content to not just shoot here, but to also possibly assemble and deliver from here.
So is it, when you're talking like content, because it's changed so dramatically, you said 10 years.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it used to be you had, I'm not in this industry at all, you are, but you used to have like the big movies and everything was done in LA. And that was kind of it. Now we have Netflix and Hulu and Amazon and like you have all these people producing content, but that content has to go somewhere.
Yep.
Or not. So it's not just the filming side of things is what you're saying.
Right. So let's take a look at really what drives this whole thing is the consumers that buy and watch the content. And what you'll see demographically is that, our parents, and I'll age myself real quick, I'm Gen X, we grew up in the movie theaters. And so, we have a nostalgic appeal to the movie theaters. And in some ways, now that we're parents and we're older, the home theater has really become like a little mini theater. And so we're still kind of connected to that nostalgia. But if you go down another generation or even two, that nostalgia doesn't necessarily exist because they're growing up with the content in their living rooms, and then they're going out to the bus stops and watching it on their phones. And so,
that's so true, yeah.
So what's happening is that the content needs to just be delivered to the person. It doesn't have to necessarily be aimed for the theater or for the living room or for the mobile device. So the studios know this, and their job is to make good content that's interesting to us, good stories, but make it easy to consume so that wherever you are, you can just decide to watch something. And Netflix certainly is the leader of the pack as far as formulating that business model. And so this comes back to answering your first question, which is we need to start realizing that that's how the media industry works now.
Right.
And we need to start thinking in terms of loading up our kids that are going through schools with the kind of knowledge that allows them to play in that space if that's interesting to them.
Yeah, and I think, so we're always thinking of like these big movies where Mark Wahlberg's here, or, I know, Tom Cruise's ex was just here filming. They had they had something of
Nicole
her.
Kidman.
Yeah, I think, or somebody was here.
Yeah.
And then there was pictures with the governor and Bill Cosby or somebody. Yeah.
Yep.
And so it's interesting. That's what we're thinking, but there's a whole different backside to this all.
Yeah.
That is, so when we look at your company, Cinnafilm, and we look at the post-production, what exactly does Cinnafilm do? Okay,
so that's also a loaded question that I love. Thank you.
I know you're like you're an engineer, right?
So. I am. So it started with the goal of trying to take video shot on a video camera back in the old days and try to make it look like film. And to solve that problem, I hired some very smart people, way smarter than me, to break down moving pictures as a data set and completely reformulate how it plays out. And so the original goal was to make basically a really great film look software for independent filmmakers. What ended up happening is when I took it out to Hollywood, they said, this is the best X or the best Y or the best Z I've ever seen. And so I had to start pivoting my business model because it turns out that folks in the enterprise space pay a lot more than independent filmmakers. Nothing against the independent crowds. It's just, if you're going to build a business around something, you got to follow how the actual market response to your product is.
Right.
So in a nutshell, what we do is we convert and we fix, we repair, we optimize moving pictures to guarantee the absolute best playback quality mathematically possible. And so that's a lot of moving parts. Something could be shot poorly or lit poorly. Something could be edited incorrectly. They could mix frame rates together. They could shoot it in the wrong resolution. They could have a bunch of noise in the signal. All of these things permeate to bad-looking content. And paramount to the value proposition that a studio gives to the user is that our content is not only a good story, but it plays well. Like, you're not going to be distracted by the fact that it's stuttering all over the place, or ghosting, or jumping around, or have all these weird line artifacts and stuff like that. So we've developed a software with our own intellectual property that basically automatically cleans and repairs all of that. And that's really important, especially when you're talking about bringing old content from pre-2000 era before the HD really took hold. So the standard def stuff from the old television days, well, preparing that for streaming, all of that content has to be reformulated into a cleaner frame rate. It has to be reformulated into what's called a progressive format, which is, think of it as a whole picture instead of those weird lines.
Right.
Those weird lines were actually a technological marvel that allowed television signal to be sent over the airwaves. The funny thing is that Europe is metric, American is English. So Europe is 50 hertz, America's 60 hertz. And so there's always been this fundamental mismatch even at the television rate. So now what's happening is we want to stream content everywhere, and you start bringing up all that old legacy content, and there's all kinds of problems.
So you take like, this will be funny, but you take like Magnum PI TV show from the 80s.
Yeah.
That would have to be redone.
Yeah. So I'll use that as an exact example. So the chances are good, and I don't know this for certain, that Magnum PI was probably shot on film, which means it was shot at 24 frames a second. It was then telecine converted into NTSC interlaced to be able to be shown on a 2997 monitor in your living room. Again, that looks really good when you look at it on a television in the old days. So now the master is this different frame rate, interlaced version of a tape transfer from a film transfer. You start bringing that out for modern show, you've got all kinds of problems. You've got to get down to the original frame rate. You've got to up-res it for HD or 4K. You got to remove all those interlacing artifacts. You probably have tape transfer noises. I'm telling you, if you don't do that stuff, it looks terrible.
So if Netflix picked that up through their licensing or whatever and put Magnum PI on there, they would have to get this done. Because they're not going to stream that old show without it being...
They should, but they don't all. They're under huge pressure to deliver more content quicker to everybody. Right. And so if you watch Netflix, chances are good most shows look pretty good, especially the ones that they're pointing you to or original content because they sort of thought about all this in advance.
Right.
But when you watch an old show, sometimes it looks really good and sometimes it looks terrible. It looks pixelated.
You're right. I've seen that. Yeah.
And those are people taking shortcuts that don't have the budget to fix what we fix. So we sell enterprise grade software that does all of those conversions. We do the World Cup's a good example. So when it's shot in Europe at that 50 hertz, needs to screen here in the Americas, which is all up and down Canada to Argentina, right? Needs to be in 60 frames per second. That conversion is very, very, very difficult. There's only 3 or 4 companies in the world that do it right, and we're one of them. So all the content that you ever watch when the Olympics or the World Cup is on another content likely goes through our software for the conversion. That's an example of one problem that we solve. So in short, we convert media to guarantee the smoothest playback wherever it's watched. And why is smooth playback so vital? Because if you don't have smooth playback, the user is taken out of the story. And when the user is taken out of the story, they lose interest, they switch channels, they end their subscription.
And so whenever you're looking like, for example, let's use the World Cup. So that was streaming live? Or is your software having to, as the match is being played, is your software having to adjust to that live or?
Yeah, so by and large, our technology is file-based, so it's not live. It's more so when all the content comes off the field, it will go through our engine and convert it into the American frame rate. So by the time it lands at, say, ESPN Central in Connecticut, the editors don't have to worry about anything. They're just cutting all the pieces together.
Oh,
for live streaming, we're not quite there for live. I mean, it's just sort of a different market than what we do.
Right.
And there is big hardware with silicon, burned in that does these types of algorithms and does a pretty good job of that. So we're mainly on the file-based side. So anything for VOD, for video on demand, or those types of things. But we are starting to look at live streaming. It's just the technology had to get there. The compute has to get fast enough to be able to run these types of algorithms that you don't need to burn them into little chips.
So I watch British Premier League, and that comes from the UK, obviously.
Yep.
And then I have a NBC subscription model that has all these different, British Premier League shows and stuff like that.
Yep.
So, and then that's on there on demand. Whenever I want to watch it, I can watch it.
Yep.
And it's super clean and clear in HD when I watch it.
That's our stuff that does that.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So instead of it stuttering or looking weird in that conversion, they likely used our technology. We do a lot of Premier League and a lot of soccer. So it's more than likely all those files have been run through our Tachyon.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So the video on demand in and of itself, once it goes through you said engine, it goes through that. Then from there, it's available to have them put it. Now, do you give it back to them?
Yeah. So here's the way to think of it. when you do these types of conversions, you have a file. And in that file, there's picture, sound, and all kinds of little bits, right, that kind of define it. So what we do is we take the package apart, we take the video essence out, we fix it or convert it and put it back into a new package. And while that's being done, the audio can be fixed or remixed or what have you,
right?
Or the metadata can be rewritten. So you take file A and now you're creating file B, and now file B is ready for playout. In the case of video on demand, more than likely they have 5 or 6 different files they output at different bit rates, and they have the technology to step through whichever file they can play without buffering to you. That's why, like when you're watching live, sometimes you watch Hulu, all of a sudden it'll get pixelated for 30 seconds and it goes back. That's because the river got clogged, right? But what they did is they downstepped to a lesser quality file so you could not be pulled out of the story. That's nothing I can do anything about.
Right.
But that's an example. Another example is like Jaws, for example. So that's an example of a Spielberg title done at NBC Universal. When they redid that for Blu-ray, they need to go back, and when they look at the old film scans, they're really grainy, they've aged. Now try to put that on a really beautiful Blu-ray disc. They have problems with too much noise. So what our technology allows them to do is remove and readjust the film grain level so that it actually looks like the original film grain might have back in 1977 when the film was released.
So can you actually take something that's old like that and turn it into HD?
Yes. So we're involved. Most of our bread and butter is served up in sports and in broadcast and in video on demand. But we started in cinema, and we've got a nice little niche application that we are involved with restoration of important movies. A lot of movies that get restored and brought back out to cinema or get brought back out to Blu-ray, they use our technology to remove all the old dust, fix the old heavy grain patterns, and we've got a long laundry list of movies that have gone through our software.
That's wild, because I think for all of us, when we're sitting there and we're watching something, we don't understand exactly what's happening, that it's actually been, like you said, has a whole new package put on it.
You'll see these movies come out and they'll say newly optimized or freshly whatever. I mean, it's whatever marketing.
Exactly.
They probably used our technology to do that.
Yeah, that's because I always think it's like, that's always been a question I had. It's like, how can you take something that was filmed so old and make it look like it's HD? Like they just redid a lot of World War II stuff. Yeah,
that Peter Jackson movie, that was our technology as well.
Oh, wow.
So they used our technology first to convert erratic hand-cranked frame rate to a solid 24 frames a second. And then they also used our technology in other ways to clean up some of the other artifacts as well.
And I know they just did, because I know they were releasing it back to the theater.
Yeah.
They just did a Vietnam, I think it was a Vietnam movie, an old, and when they were showing it on a preview, I was like, and they had the helicopters flying over the sunset and all that. Apocalypse Now.
Yeah.
I was looking at that and I was like, how could they do that? That just looks amazing.
That's what we do. So it's more fun to talk about those projects than, some of the broad brush, things that we do in large scope workflows. But it's all comes back to the same thing. Our company provides the people that own that media content. It affords them the ability to sleep at night knowing that it's looking its absolute best when it's watched wherever it's watched, whether that's...
And however it's watched.
Right, exactly.
Right, yeah. No, that makes sense. So whenever because I don't want to get too technical, but whenever let's say you package it into, we'll use my soccer analogy.
Sure.
And you package it so that it buffers really clean. So literally there's 6-8 different, so that how does it come to me as the end user? How does it come to me that clean, regardless of what like you said, whether it's clogged or my internet, is it bouncing from package to package?
And to be honest, that's that area of the business I'm a little less affluent in. We do not do any of the delivery of the content. We just help the content owners prepare those packets.
Right.
And then they have technology that steps up and down, and there's a lot of really smart people that's all they do and that's all they focus on.
So this post-production is huge.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean, that's only part of what is going on with video on demand.
Yes.
So those are the jobs that you're talking about that are highly skilled jobs. Is there a need for these type of?
Oh, absolutely. So let me clarify a little further. So the movie industry, when I got into it, was very much analog and tape based, right? It was all film or it was all tape. And now and then somewhere in the 2000s, it all went to HD and then went digital, right? And there's a lot of very smart people to thank for pushing those envelopes. For example, George Lucas doing the first, all digital when he redid the first Star Wars as an example. And now it's gone from all digital to all file. And the only way for all of these folks to keep up is to do this work in a place where they can rent the machines, and that is the cloud. And that's what Netflix did that was so brilliant, is they had all this content that they licensed. They hosted it all on servers, and depending on the demand, they just fire up more servers. And so that they have a very flexible model that they don't have to overinvest on hardware in order to serve the market and guess whether the hardware is going to be used. So the cloud is really the next big thing. And I'm trying to come back to your question. So if we think about what is the common denominator, media and entertainment is a very healthy market. There is a lot of money. It's like the second biggest market. And if you look at the $72 billion, whatever it was, acquisition of Fox by Disney, it shows you how big and how much money is being thrown at the equation. Google, Microsoft, Amazon, these big tech giants are making tons of money on the cloud and on their devices that stream video, right? So the sheer number of hours of video that are watched every day, if I said it now, I'd be wrong. But if you Google like how much video goes over the internet each day, it'll blow your mind. It's like hundreds of millions of hours.
I know, like YouTube alone was just crazy.
The common denominator here is big data. Now that the movies are all big in file world, they're just giant lumps of data. Incredibles 2 is a 2.5 terabyte file, the master.
Wow.
Okay, that's just one copy. Terabyte.
2.5 terabytes.
Yeah.
And you can transfer that back and forth?
Well, no, then they have to compress it. In order for it to go down these little skinny IP pipes that we connect our computers and our phones to, they compress it. So they use compression technology, right? So, but as far as jobs go, if the entire media and entertainment sector is based on data, then serves us to take a look at how can we play in big data? How can we play in providing some of these servers in the desert where all this stuff is stored, and how can we play in the movement of that data through all of these pipelines? Because if 80% plus, or whatever the number is, it's close to 80% of all internet traffic is video,
right?
What we're sitting on is basically, this is the new automotive industry, and the Model T just came out. And so New Mexico has to make the conscious decision to build the highways, the hotels, the gas stations, because if we don't, they're just going to go up and around us. Like there's no, so when I think
you feel like, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you feel like we're in Model T stages in this?
Yes. I think that's the beginning of where we are now. And there's so much data to move around, especially as the virtual headsets get better and some of these things. It's all just data. I mean, not to get too weirded out here, but we're just consciousness looking at data, right? So all of this is data. Yeah. It's stored in the environment, and our consciousness engages it. And that's so much data. You could, just to put this room would probably take some billions of petabytes, right? But we're going to get to there. I mean, you can't rationalize it now, nor could we rationalize what petabytes even meant 10, 15 years ago.
Right.
So the point is, if we really want to play in the video space, okay, never mind whether it's got the Disney name attached to it, or Premier League Soccer, or even like YouTube stars that, I still don't know who any of these people are, but they're doing great.
I was shocked at how many is here in Albuquerque.
Well,
there's several.
What they all have in common is they're all creating data sets, and they're all moving these data sets along these highways. Okay, so when it comes to jobs, if we want jobs in big data or in media, then we need to start thinking that this is how the movie business works now. Pushing big data sets around, assembling them into some different type of data set, and delivering them over the internet. And if we can create legislation or school programs that support that truth,
right?
Because that's how it works, then
that's an important word, truth.
Yeah, then that's what we should be looking at, instead of just saying, well, let's narrow it down and just say, well, post-production services, let's just focus on that little niche, because then folks will go, well, wait a minute, that doesn't help me. But if we focus on cloud compute and we focus on big data, well, guess who else uses big data? Healthcare,
right?
Military,
right?
I mean, that's the point. So it's sort of like moving big data sets around very efficiently is the new automotive industry, and it's up to our leaders.
Because everything's in data packets. I mean, everything will get to that point. I have another podcast after this one it's a higher conscious podcast, but more on the spiritual side of things. And my co-host owns a tech company where he moves data packets. And then, like for instance, I'll give you an example. Let's say I make a video, which I do a lot on Instagram. Well, he has the ability with his company to be able to take that data and then turn around and sell it to other companies. And then that person like myself would get, my data's worth something.
Yeah.
So there's like a monetary exchange that's happening, especially on, with Bitcoin and stuff like that, because a lot of people, it's more than just currency.
Yeah.
On your end, I could imagine they're not just the data packet, but there's so much attachment to it. And I'm the name is confusing me, that tech blockchain.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot that can be done on the movie side of things.
So coming back to your jobs question, whether it's jobs in media and entertainment or in healthcare, if we step back and say, what is the real common denominator? What is the thing that's going to lay the groundwork for maybe the next 30 or 40 or 50 years for the state as far as taxable revenue goes? That we need to go play in that game. And media and entertainment is already here with large data sets, wanting to sell them. So it's already started. So the Oklahoma land grab started already. The gun went off. And it's great that absolutely fantastic that we're on the front end of production, what I call the media supply chain. Not what I call, other people call it too, but what I like to educate people is it really is a media supply chain. You're assembling goods and shipping them. It's no different for media, and it all resides on the concept of collecting, protecting, and distributing data, and the compute that's necessary to do that. And if we play friendly in that space, then the studios will recognize that, because they have a whole lot of work to do. They almost have an impossible task in front of them with the demand, the pressure that they're under to deliver good stories, not overspend, but get as much out there and see what sticks. So they're looking for the greasy wheel wherever they can find it. They absolutely are. And so I think we've done a magnificent job of putting the greasy wheel on the front end of the supply chain. And I'm saying on the back end, instead of focusing on media and entertainment, let's focus on big data compute. Because that's going to, look, this Facebook
servers,
plant. That's the starting. That means someone agrees with me out there on what I'm saying and orchestrated and closed that deal. And it's the first, and no, it probably wasn't perfect, and someone got left out, or they forgot to sign or the power bill wasn't. There's always something,
right?
But you gotta try and keep doing that, and eventually, if we play it right, if this place is littered with software companies and cloud services, then you're talking thousands of very high-end jobs. And if people love the movie business, they can have a high-end, good-paying job in the movie business. They like healthcare, or they don't care. They can be a coder. The whole paradigm is changing. And I'll add one more thing. The other nice thing that having this cloud power affords is you no longer have to be in any one particular place to create and do business as a software company. You can call anywhere home. And one of the best appealing things in Albuquerque, coming back to the first thing we said, was we've got good culture, we've got good food, we've got good air. We need to do a little work on a few other things. I know that it's not perfect. We got a long way to go, but
we got land.
We have sunshine.
Yeah.
We have clean air. Right. So it's like you can be a world-class programmer and do it out of your home in the Northeast Heights or down the South Valley quietly and go out and raise your chickens in the afternoons. And that, I think, should appeal to everybody, because then they're getting paid a good wage. They love what they do, but then they can go outside and not hear honking horns if that's what they want to do.
Right, because I know the amount of people that are moving out of Silicon Valley area. Yeah. It's just incredible. I think they said there's 25,000 people moving a month to Colorado.
Yeah. Well, we've got to stop
Austin's packed now.
We've got to stop that. And look, it's really just their states showing that opportunity exists. And so it's not a magical formula. We just have to make the conscious decision to do it. And it can't just be me that's out there, beating the drum. I mean, we all sort of have to figure this out.
No, I think that's amazing. And I think understanding that and knowing that there's more opportunity than they can even imagine if they get away from thinking on the front end.
Right.
And kind of looking more on the back.
Yeah.
That it's just not the movie industry that we're looking at. It's government, it's military, it's Google, it's Facebook, it's, Amazon. Because I know Amazon servers are.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be all about big tech. Big tech brings the big motherships here.
Right.
But guess what happens from motherships? The little aliens leave the motherships and they go create their own little ships. And so we need more motherships here to bring some more anchored tenants here. But the nice thing about what the cloud does is it allows small software companies like mine to play on a global scale. I mean, I'm proof that can exist. So if we're kind to big data, and I'm not talking about big private data. So I'm just talking about the movement of computing big data sets in the cloud, if we're kind to that, but we're also kind to doing commerce over the internet, like for small software companies, because the laws shouldn't be the same for Cinnafilm as it is for Amazon. No offense to Amazon, but you're Amazon. You've got all the money that you need. It should be a different tax bracket.
Yes, exactly.
So we need to do some structured thought processes to not only be friendly to big data, but also create like the soil so that when the aliens leave the mothership, they feel, oh, I'm not moving. My kids are over at El Dorado. I'm not going anywhere. I'm happy here, and I can just start my company here. And so it just needs to be sort of a broader thought process. But I also say don't overcomplicate it.
I think blockchain will be interesting, because then as a company in the UK could turn around, take your data along with it in that blockchain and have it bypass. I mean, literally they could bypass banks, taxes. Yeah. I mean, you could bypass everything. If that company and you were willing to be paid in cryptocurrency, it literally, if that takes off, it can change these data packets that you're talking about, because inside the data packet would come the exchange of that monetary value back and forth.
And I think that this is just me on my miniature soapbox here. I think it's old school thinking to say, well, let's tax on a transactional basis, because then the only thing that's going to happen from that is that these companies who have oodles of resources are going to figure out ways to work around it.
Right.
What that does is it prevents small companies like mine, because I don't have oodles of resources to think my way around it. So it's like, okay, now I got to go look at a place like Austin where they don't tax on transactional basis. And 7 days after the Supreme Court ruled in favor of South Dakota over Wayfair last year, they changed some of their regulations to support the hundreds of SaaS companies that are growing in their ecosystem, right? So they were smart. So that's the kind of stuff we need to do. We need to be really aggressive, to be really thoughtful about that, because look, if you bring more people here, they're going to go out and they're going to spend taxes on cars and homes. Of course,
the city tax. Exactly.
So this is what I'm saying. Like, when we think about internet commerce and big data and supporting that, because it also will grow the other back half of the film industry, if we're smart about it, you're going to draw all kinds of interested parties who will realize that they just want to come and find a nice place to call home, and they just want to run. In other words, we have to think a little bit forward, like further than 5 years, like 10, 15 years. And, that's a tall task when we've got so many problems that we're trying to figure out here in the state.
And then also you have that old mindset, like you said, because I know here recently, now they're taxing, if I buy something on Amazon, I'm paying tax on that.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, that is a ton of revenue that's coming into I think it's mainly the state that's getting that.
Probably.
But to turn around and set and tax you so let's get a little bit of clarity on that so business leaders can understand what you're talking about.
Sure.
So if you're making a transaction with Warner Brothers, let's say, and you're redoing a film, and they charge you so much, whatever, and then now, do you get taxed on that now when you transfer those files back and forth? Or those
So let's clarify a couple of things. One, we don't do the service, so we sell the technology to Warner,
right? And
Warner does the service, or we sell the technology to the post house that does the service. Right. So we sell the surgical blades to the surgeons.
Oh,
okay. So, and for quite some time, selling zeros and ones through email wasn't a taxable event, right? But now what's happening is that they're trying to figure out a way to make it a taxable event. So, which, I don't mind charging more tax for my that's not the problem. But SaaS is different. SaaS is software as a service. So what that means is that I've taken my software stack and I'm running it in Amazon, and I've put a front end on it so anybody anywhere on the planet can log in and do their own conversion. Mm-hmm. And I charge them, let's say $1, $2, $3, $5, what it does matter. I charge them for the transaction. So I'm realizing the revenue from a virtual machine I put in Oregon. It comes from Oregon to me vis-a-vis through wherever they were originally. And what I'm saying is it's getting too difficult. And if we charge tax on each of those microtransactions, then it's putting the burden on the companies that build these models up to guarantee they know where they. In other words, it's just
it could be really sticky.
Mess.
Oregon could charge you taxes, and then that where that company's at when they're
it's dominoes, and what that's not American. I'm just sorry, but
I agree 100%.
It just it can't be so hard to do these things that we've overthought ourselves into the corner. So look, I realize that I can't control literally hardly anything in my own world, yet alone outside of it. So I'm just saying that we have to come up with plans that are forward thinking, that give the companies that are going to be needing cloud compute and moving data around the ability to make the decision better to move here and do business from here, because it's easier and they can keep more of their money. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
Because then they hire more people, and those people go out and they buy gas. So it's just a balance of the ecosystem.
Well, I think also, why is Austin doing so well, or Colorado's doing so well, or where I'm from, Seattle?
Yeah.
There's also this intangible of it being a cool city.
Yeah.
And people want to come here. When I talk to people that move to Albuquerque, outsiders, they're always like, mountain biking's amazing.
Yep.
I can go ski.
Yep.
I come from Seattle, Portland. I have to admit, the beer here is way better.
It is better. You're right. I'm glad you've discovered that.
Last time I went, I was like beer snob. Like we've had, we've had breweries for 15 years. Albuquerque's just starting. When I came down here, I was like, well, I'm gonna have to like Dos Equis and Corona. Typical being an idiot. I come down here and I'm just blown away. Now when I go back to Portland or Seattle, nothing against them, but the IPAs here are amazing. The way that they're producing, which is it's content.
Yes.
The way that they're producing it is, and I feel like we're in that beginning stage of Albuquerque being a really cool city. So it's now, instead of looking at it, how can the state make more money?
Right.
It's like, how can we help these companies come in and help innovate?
It's choosing an identity. It's a culture choice.
That's a good, yes.
It's a culture choice. We have made a few culture choices, for better or worse. We are very much dependent on oil and natural gas and mineral sciences. And you know what? There's a demand and a need for that, and a lot of hardworking people. So, but in the long run, are we going to have to start thinking solar, right? That's an identity choice.
Right.
At some point, that will come up. At some point. Aerospace, defense, labs, that's an identity choice. And we're very proud of those things. That's the sector I came out of originally. Cattle and farming, with big swaths of land and some of the things that we do, that's an identity choice.
But everything you're talking about seems to be more archaic systems. Whenever you're looking at something like you said, and I think it's a perfect analogy, the Model T.
Yeah, well, it's what's the next identity choice? Because you know what? When the car industry came up, Route 66 was an identity choice that we glommed onto, and a lot of people came out here and made well on that.
Right.
My grandfather built a Texaco in this town in 1961 and sold it and did very well for himself in 1983 or something. And that was an identity choice because everybody wanted to be out on the open road in a big old Oldsmobile or one of these Fords, right? So it's an identity choice. And so what we have to figure out is, what is our next thing? And if we're really gung-ho about the film industry, great. Bring the studios here. My guess would be you'll see more coming.
Right.
I don't know anything anybody else doesn't know. I'm just saying, you put clever law in place, look what happens. And so if the next identity choice could be something like, let's be forward thinking in the world of software, cloud compute, big data. Let's see who comes. It's really just choosing that and then supporting it as a culture. Like, I support oil and gas. I support, all these other different cultures because they're part of our identity. But we have to also be thinking about what is going to be next.
Right. So let's use Route 66, because I know we're on the tail end of this and I want to talk more about your company. But so when we created an automobile through Henry Ford, we began to get infrastructures. I don't remember who was it that built all the freeways and highways? What president got involved? I don't think it was. Oh gosh,
maybe Truman. I don't know.
But they began to, and then once we built that infrastructure,
Roosevelt, I think.
Yeah. Once we built that infrastructure, then we turned around and, like you said, there was Texacos that began to happen, then hotels, and then airports, and the list went on and on and on.
Yep.
Like you said earlier, this domino effect began to happen.
Yep.
If we're in the beginning of just building an automobile, then to me that seems like, what city would not try to at least get an advisory committee together or board together and say, we are in this huge opportunity. And something that is, because it's transforming the way we do. Like you said, these kids watch it on their phone. They're consuming, constantly. And it's only going to get worse as we get VR and all that. And all that's coming. There's no stopping any of this.
Agreed.
So how could we in Albuquerque build the roads? And then, because naturally, once we build the roads, everything around it is going to just automatically fall in place.
Well, that's what I believe. And by thinking 10 or 15 years in the future and coming up with and talking to folks at Amazon and at Microsoft and at Google and doing our homework and really formulating something that's effective and powerful. Then the next time Jeff Bezos comes along or Bill Gates comes along, Albuquerque natives, they're not going to move. They're going to create their empires here. Because like I said, it won't matter if the resources are here for that next genius to come along, whoever he or she is, and the culture is here for that genius to come along, then it won't matter what our population is. It won't, because we'll have what we need. And this comes back to the great liberating thing about the cloud, which is I can sell my technology to someone in Norway right now while I'm asleep. And
right.
I get to walk down to the co-op on Rio Grande to get my eggs. Okay? So if we're focused on the big play and really do it right, and it's not going to be perfect, and get it out there, then you just have to let the private sector do the rest. And the next Google will come from Albuquerque and maybe stay in Albuquerque.
Right.
And grow, and then the other states will copy what we do, just like they copied what we did with the film incentives.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
So, yeah.
So there is this ability for us to be able to take this opportunity, because that's what it is right now.
Yeah.
To take this opportunity that we have with the film industry and turn around and 100 times what's going now, because that amount of future growth is more than we can anticipate.
Yeah. That's an identity we chose, and look how well we're doing. Because we chose it and we support it, and the school programs support it, and the charter schools that have media as a basis are 95% graduation rates. I mean, it's an identity that works, and we should be very proud of it. Just like the new identity with the space tourism thing. I think it's amazing, and that's going to be huge for southern New Mexico. So what I'm saying is, what's next? And that has to flow, just frankly, it has to flow from the top down. It has to flow from the folks that want to see and be involved and commit to something like that. And there are other people besides me that are out there that are building their business models on the freedom that the internet creates. Mm-hmm. And so it's not always going to be hard to do work on the internet. It's just still early days. People are fighting about it and scrapping about it. But before you know it, it's going to be here, and hopefully we're ready for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So what is the future for Cinnafilm? What are you looking at? What are new things, projects, or that you'd like to share?
Sure. So right now we're focused. So, I mentioned earlier that, when I got into this, I just wanted to be working in cinema and wanted to create a tool set that could sort of reformulate what the images looked like. And then I got into broadcast, and now it's over the top video on demand, and it's moved so fast. And the next big wave that's coming is HDR. So for folks that don't know what HDR is or what it means, it's basically a bigger, better, and deeper color space. So you probably remember a few years ago, there was a little smattering of television sets at Sears in a few places that had like 3D. Right, and that didn't stick. And I could, it would just be it didn't look good. It gave people headaches. They're going to have to find $200 pair of sunglasses, to put on to watch TV. And it depended on where. I could have told them from the get-go it wasn't going to work. But with HDR, the goal here with HDR is to make it look as close to reality as possible. I mean, we see in HDR. Our visible color spectrum is incredible. Evolutionary science, if you believe in it, you can thank for that. And after eons of seeing things in the dark and seeing things in light, we have this huge, amazing span of ability to see things moving. And so what folks are really trying to do now is to drive that color depth into the television sets. And when you see it, you know it. It's a little on the bright side, kind of early days, but you can go to Best Buy today and get an HDR-capable television set. Well, just because you have an HDR television-capable set doesn't mean you're watching HDR. The content that arrives to your television has to be in HDR format. And if it wasn't captured in that format, you got to get it there. And so Cinnafilm's next big product is called Xenon. It's joining a family of other products, and with the ability to convert standard dynamic range content into high dynamic range content. We have a partnership with Technicolor for that, and we had a nice little splash on the front page of the Journal a couple weeks ago for that new product. So I'm hoping that this is the last change for a while on delivery formats.
Right.
Like they keep, it was a high def, and then it was 4K, and then it was 3D for a year, and now it's HDR. And so these things are hard to do, to get this stuff in there. And I had to go forge a partnership with Technicolor Labs that, they'd been working on this algorithm for 6 or 7 years just to even pull it off so that it looked good. So this stuff is really, really tough. So I'm hoping this is the last picture thing that I have to do for a while. And then next year I'm going to be focused primarily on this, on moving these workflows for the studios into the cloud, and also I'm going to start diving into audio. So right now we license audio from a couple partners, and it does a pretty fair job, but I want to bring the audio portion up a little bit. So look for some exciting announcements in the next few months about audio.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because audio people don't realize what is happening in that space.
Yeah.
You know, we think of radio back in the day, but I mean, you're on a podcast right now. The downloads have been incredible.
Yeah.
Even like if you look at Stitcher or you look at Apple, it's almost like everything's afterthoughts, and despite how bad the programming is on all of that, it's still taking off.
Yeah.
And then, YouTube now you have people watching, Joe Rogan or, these others, and it's, millions and millions of views of two people sitting with microphones.
Yeah.
Absorbing this long form content.
Yeah. And
that's how we're wanting to understand things. Even though, and it's interesting to me, even though the news and everything's out there in, little milliseconds, we still have this desire to have a 2-hour discussion.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Joe Rogan recently had Bernie Sanders on, and it was amazing, whether you like him or not or whatever, doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But it was interesting. There was like a 45-minute conversation, and it was almost awkward because these politicians have become so adept to doing the 1 or 2 minute little sound bites and then arguing over each other.
Yeah.
That to sit down and have a type of conversation like that, and then to make sure that because right now you have Adobe, maybe a few other companies, but to get voice right, there's not a lot going on in that space.
Yeah, audio is as important to the experience as picture is. In fact, it's arguable that if a movie sounds terrible, you'll walk out before if it looks terrible. It's just we're more hypersensitive with our ears than we are with our eyes. And that's also in large part because there's so much data coming in through the visual cortex that we have to screen a lot of it out. So we got a lot of filtering happening on the visual side. Where audio, if there's a bird that flies in your window and screeches in your ear, you're going to jump out of your seat for 5 feet.
Right.
So one of the challenges that we're going to have with audio is to make that sound good in the living room. And you probably notice when you stream that one show to the next on Netflix sounds great. The next one you can hardly hear the dialogue.
It's
all over the map. So this is important. And so that's sort of my next pet project. But, I'm probably going to partner with someone on that. And we'll be announcing that in the next few months. But that's, automating beautiful picture quality. That's about where we are now. There's still a little bit of development that we have to do to make it even more automated and hands off, because the more you can do it automated, the more work you make. All right. So, but on the audio side, it's time to bring up the audio, because I have yet to have a night of streaming experience where like everything sounded good. And here's why, because when a movie comes out, now you've got Dolby Atmos.
Right.
So you got 12 channels to mix. And what is the goal? Same thing as with HDR, to make it sound real. So you got an explosion on the left, and a bullet that whizzes by on the left, and a dog that barks behind you, and a baby that screams in front of you, and the dialogue has to look roughly where the mouth is on the screen and stuff like that. So it's spatial, right? Trying to create spatial information. Well, take those 12 channels that someone with a lot of money spent a lot of time exactly placing that spatial location in audio, and now cram that down the pipeline, of your internet and through whatever sound bar that you bought from Best Buy, and who knows what's going on in the sound bar.
Right.
It's no wonder that it's really hard to pick up on audio. So it's an industry-wide problem. And I just think that it's sort of like, for me, the last frontier, because I've conquered a lot of mountains in picture quality. And so this is, what I want to do next. And what's nice is with this tool set we've put together, it includes all of that. So.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
One last question, because I know we're almost at an hour here.
Okay.
As far as, because everybody always wants to understand this, and we all have this fear of it. In your industry and what you're doing, especially on the post-production side, artificial intelligence, machine learning, all that, is that beginning to play a role, or are we not even close? Does it still have human interaction?
It is. That's a great question, and I'm glad you asked it, because that's something to keep a real careful eye on. The most important thing is that no one knows art and story better than humans. I don't care what robot painted what robot edited what. To me, I don't care how close it gets. If it's not created by a soul, it's not soulful.
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
So, and I think you're going to see, with everyone trying to get your eyes on their content, I think people that are fooling around with trying to do AI and editing movies or creating movies just from computers are just maybe I'm wrong, but I think they're barking up the wrong tree. I think at the end of the day, people will know what's good and what's not. They'll just not. It's just like when you look at certain visual effects, and that's not real, and you're like, yeah, that's a turnoff. It's a distraction. So AI that people are using to discern what the story should be and how it should play and what the music should sound like, I think that's just a waste of time, personally.
What about on as far as what you're doing? Would machine learning be able to know what a human's doing to make, for simplification, make it so it's saying, okay, I need to make this at this moment, I need to make this a little bit lighter so that it looks better. Would a machine learn that over time?
Maybe, because, it comes back to, would a machine be able to create Mozart? When he went through and he's adding each note specific because he knows that's the note that has to be there. It's not a lot different when an editor and a colorist and audio person are assembling these works of art, which they really are. Whether the story's good or not is different, but it's going to be a while before a machine will make a better choice than a person, because the person knows what sounds good. He or she knows what sounds good, looks good. And I mean, is it worth trying to educate a machine to do what humans do best? Because at the end of the day, we're selling this to humans, not to machines.
Right.
But that said, keep in mind the factory analogy I use. So if we collect all the raw materials, the ability to hustle those materials through the factory is absolutely going to need AI. And that's being able to find the right shots, being able to find the shots that are framed right, being able to go and find historical information, or go and find, like if you're building a documentary, being able to quickly access all those assets and assemble them fast and quickly. Yeah, the robots are going to have to help us. There's no doubt about it. But will they be the final judge and jury on the output and what gets seen in the living room? Hopefully the only thing that they're doing is making sure the humans didn't miss anything obvious.
Okay, that makes sense. Well, thank you, Lance. I appreciate you being on the Albuquerque Business Podcast. This was, I think, amazing, and you can tell you're extremely knowledgeable in this, so I appreciate that, and I hope it was extremely positive towards Albuquerque, and I know you're from here.
Yeah.
You grew up here. Were you born?
I was.
Oh, you were born here, yeah.
Yep.
So I'm just excited because I think that we are in the beginning stages of something that can be great.
Yeah.
And the city can be an amazing city. I don't see another city, and I say this all the time, but Austin's done, Colorado's done.
Yeah.
Maybe Boise and us are about on the west side of things. California's done, Oregon's done, Washington's done. So, as far as having land and having structure, I feel like Albuquerque is, 10, 15 years out. And I know companies like you are what will cause that culture shift to happen.
Yep.
And that, regardless, people look at your company as being cool. It's very technical, but it's something that is needed. And so I appreciate you. I appreciate your company. I appreciate you staying here and staying local to Albuquerque. So that's awesome. So thank you, Lance. Appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having me. And I appreciate the questions. They were all really great. And I would say unequivocally, having been born and raised and educated here, this is a great city. It's got more potential than it realizes. And so my hope would be that we can take advantage of the amazing identity we already have and then prepare ourselves for the long haul to be even more successful.
That's awesome. Well, thank you, Lance. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the time.
Thank you for joining us on the Albuquerque Business Podcast. And thank you to our sponsor, DukeCityMarketing.com. Please go to abqpodcast.com, where you can get show notes, resources, and links to everything we talked about today to help you navigate your journey as an entrepreneur and business owner in Albuquerque.